So who in here is a middle child? Okay, so we have a few in here. So keep your hand raised if you feel you've been a victim of middle child syndrome. Okay. Well, don't worry, I won't ramble too much about how much it sucks to not be the oldest or youngest sibling in your family, but if you've known me for a while, you should have seen this coming at some point. To begin, I'm going to give a definition of what middle child syndrome is. It is the belief that middle children are excluded, ignored, or even outright neglected because of their birth order. Now, I would like to preface this by saying that in no means do I believe that you can just go around and blame all of your problems on being a middle child in most cases. It is a problem that most individuals face. So I'm going to begin with a story of when I was 7. Me and my family, who aren't really big on taking vacations, decided to take a trip to Disney, and it was around the time of my younger sister's birthday. Now, I had never taken a trip like this before, let alone for my birthday. Now, to my parents, this was an honest mistake, but as we had reached our resort, my family wanted to do some exploring. At our resort, there was an ice cream place that we had gone to for dessert, and as we were waiting, my parents turned to me and said, "Ava, can you go find us a table to wait out while we're waiting for dessert?" Willingly, at the age of 7, I did what I was told. The tables weren't too far from the shop that we were at, so I went to go find a table, only for my family to not come back. My own family had went to go explore the rest of the resort and outright forgot about me. Now, to my family, this wasn't a big deal, but it was the biggest deal for me, the fact that my own family was capable enough for forgetting about me. Now, I had never seen myself as being one of those who would constantly complain about how unfair their life is for being a middle child, where they're constantly being overlooked. But it's safe to say I've kind of had a change of heart. And when I say one of those, I mean the stereotypical middle child. An example of this can be the TV show Stuck in the Middle. I'm sure we've all heard of it. Janet Ortega portrays Harley, who is also named to be in the day for Week Wednesday, who is portrayed as the forgotten middle child, but also the glue of the family. Throughout the series, she shares the hardships that she endures, from her family forgetting her birthday, to her only receiving one family award at Family Award Night. Now, these problems may be more on the stereotypical side, but they are still problems. Her being the inventor and glue of her family comes at the price of almost never getting what you want, and your family being completely isolated from you. Now, the moral of the show is to portray that although Harley does experience these problems, she will always have her family to fall back on. But in most cases in real life, this just isn't the case. Now, like Harley and I, there are many characteristics that us as middle children struggle with. The 4 main characteristics that we do struggle with are personality, rivalry, relationships, and favoritism. I'm going to begin with rivalry. Now, rivalry seems to take a toll on how siblings compare themselves to each other, from middle children to their older and younger siblings. Now, researchers do define this concept as middle children feeling the need to compete with their older and younger siblings in order to get attention from their parents. Now, rivalry doesn't always happen with gaining parents' attention. It's more so everything else in life. I'm going to take sports, for example. Playing the same sport as your sibling growing up does take a negative toll on you, especially when they're better. The worst is when you and your sibling are playing in the same game and you look up to see if your parent is looking at you after you make a good play, just to look up and you see your parent taking a video of your sibling instead. It's okay, she's trying to get recruited, so I let that go a little bit. But still, the rivalry never ends. The next characteristic I'm going to talk about are relationships. Now, I believe that relationships are a very important part of life and are very crucial and necessary to help us grow as individuals. They include joy and love, and without them, how are we supposed to feel anything? However, with middle children, it's kind of hard for us to grasp this idea of relationships. I'm going to take friends, for instance. In friendships, we tend to isolate ourselves from our friends because we believe that there's always someone that we fall second best to, and that there's always going to be someone here to replace us. The next one I'm going to talk about is personality. Now, middle children kind of have a hard time standing out from the rest of their family. You have the oldest child who has a very fun and outgoing personality, where they are very strong and extroverted. And on the other hand, you have the baby of the family, the youngest child, who seems to get a lot of attention from their parents. This kind of leaves the middle child somewhere in between, where they don't really have anything special to them and nothing that helps them stand out amongst their siblings. This kind of ties into the last characteristic that I'm going to talk about, which is favoritism. Now, favoritism kind of carries on to the same with personality, because you have the oldest child she's they're the most special, they're the firstborn, so they kind of receive some favoritism there. And you have the youngest sibling who, as I said before, is the baby of the family, who receives favoritism there as well. This leaves the middle child somewhere in between, where they can't really be any child's favorite, any parent's favorite. Now, the characteristics that I just talked about do carry on into adult life. This quote here says that their personality might be dulled in comparison to their personality of other adults around them. They might even have trouble feeling that they can be a best friend or a partner's favorite person. So this syndrome does have a lasting impact when you move into adulthood. They may carry into adulthood with different aspects of your life, such as relationships and jobs that you may have. So if you thought that this syndrome only goes away when you're a child, you would be wrong. Most of you in this room, I probably assume, didn't think that middle child syndrome was a real thing and that it was fake and a myth and just a diagnosis that middle children use as an excuse for how they're feeling or to receive sympathy for them. This quote here says that the recent research shows that this syndrome is a total myth. In fact, middle children develop personality traits that help them succeed in jobs and relationships even quicker than older and younger siblings. If you are one of these people, I have a story for you of Maria Garcia and her son Mark, who were both middle children, and her son Mark suffered from middle child syndrome. So, when Mark was younger, he did not really excel as much in school as his other siblings. During after-school activities, he would only care about karate and Boy Scouts and wouldn't really care about school. When he became a teenager, he would come into school with a buzzed head, come into school with ear piercings, would skip class, run away from home, and drive without a license. During this time, both of his siblings were still excelling well in school while he was still falling back on it. This came into the point where all of his siblings and himself were going to college, and his oldest and youngest sibling were going to universities where they were receiving degrees for different specific majors, where Mark went to community college, but he ended up dropping out and took animation classes instead. However, these classes actually made him more successful. In the quote, the good news is that Mark rose from the challenges of his own journey. Even without a degree, his hard work and persistence got him into animation studios listed above. So we can see from this mother's anecdote that individuals who do suffer from middle child syndrome do have the potential to get themselves out of it, like Mark here, but at what cost? So we see in the story that Mark rebels when he's a teen, and he sees that his siblings are excelling in aspects where he is struggling, all to be successful in the end. So growing up and questioning your worth and not getting much attention from your parents just to be more successful is not worth it. Success you get, like Mark, you get on your own, while your parents are constantly helping your other siblings, either with academics or being better on the field as an athlete. It's not worth it. Your self-worth and your validation from loved ones does surpass getting ahead in life and success. So like Mark, being compared to your siblings, there are many studies that researchers have done comparing older and younger siblings to middle children. Some of these include middle children being more likely to have trouble with delinquency compared to their older and younger siblings, middle children being reported less family-oriented compared with their older siblings, and researchers noting that middle children that are born are least likely of siblings to talk with their parents about sex. So as you can see from these three things here, middle children are compared with their siblings for even the smallest and tedious things. It's just everything that they're being compared to. Now, so you're all probably wondering, Ava, why have you been rambling about why we should feel sympathy for you? I'm going to read to you the definition of middle child syndrome that I had read in the beginning. Middle child syndrome can be defined as the belief that middle children are excluded, ignored, or even outright neglected because of their birth order. Let that soak in for a minute. This is a real problem, and it's not talked about enough. Or when it is talked about, it's a joke. No one should question, especially with their friends and family, why they aren't good enough or why they don't receive the attention that they do. Like I've said in the presentation, Harley, Mark, and myself are only a small bit of the big population that experience this problem of middle child syndrome. So if you know someone who is struggling in this aspect of middle child syndrome, reassure them that they do have the love and attention that other people like their siblings do experience, because it is a big problem and it's something that we should all be aware of. Thank you.